Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Campus Consortium's EdTalk on how a global pandemic is transforming higher education. Our presenters for today's session are Renee Patton, Director of Global Education and Healthcare at Cisco, and Carl Horvath, Chief Information Officer at LaSalle University. During today's EdTalk, if you have any questions for our presenters or would like to respond to a questions they ask, please enter using the chat. We will take questions at the end of today's presentation. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to pass the platform to today's host, Carl Horvath. Over to you, Carl.
Thank you, Rosie. I can't believe we've got almost 500 people that registered for today's Ed Talk. That's a lot of people. I mean, there's hundreds on right now and more coming in every second. So this is certainly an important topic that we're talking about today, and I'm sure one that we're all dealing with because it affects everyone. You know, I can't believe the turnout, and I'm really glad we're all here to talk about our issues and maybe come up with some ideas about you know, how we can help each other. I see some of my neighboring institutions from the Philadelphia and New Jersey areas, such as Richard from Villanova University, and Gina from Bryn Mawr College, Jeffrey from Princeton Theological Seminary. We have Susan Darlington from Gwynedd Mercy University, and also joining is Carnegie Mellon University and Bucknell University. So welcome to you, and welcome to all of you that are here today. First, I wanted to start out and just tell you a little bit about what is Campus Consortium. I came to know Campus Consortium some years ago as a collaborative community that shared ideas and resources. The consortium is a leading nonprofit educational association with thousands of higher ed and K through 12 school district members. It was established 17 years ago in 2003 by the current chairman, Anjali Jain, who worked with 14 founding higher ed institutions, including Case Western Reserve University, Rochester Institute of Technology, and University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Campus Consortium established an executive advisory committee of higher ed leaders and CIOs like you and me to guide its mission and this structure, and it's still in place today. And it's great because I get to connect with all of my peers, and especially at times like this, it's great to be in a community. Campus Consortium reacts to the needs of the educational community and assists where it needs help the most. The membership includes both large and small institutions that are involved, and they want to help each other. And I've been able to implement projects at my institutions that would never have been possible without this association. I've also benefited from the collaboration and relationships of members. There's no need to really reinvent the wheel when you can leverage a community of peers who have addressed similar projects and problems. The Campus Consortium mission is to serve the underserved by providing grants and underwriting the projects that can benefit students and align with institutional strategic plans for all members. And this slide shows a few recent grant recipients. Here's some currently available grants. My institutions have benefited from this assistance, and given the current pandemic situation, I am grateful that we're currently leveraging critical services such as the after-hour and weekend IT help desk support, and improving and securing our user experience with single sign-on and the password management. This is very important now that all of our students, faculty, and staff access everything remotely. I mean, we have nobody on campus and everybody's remote. So all the more important as calls come in that they're answered and followed up, not just through our regular on-ground help desk, but with the assistance and support of the IT help desk that we were able to get. We can get 24/7 coverage and escalation of critical issues. Although we primarily have higher education institutions in attendance, I also see several organizations and vendors attending, such as IMS Global, Gartner, Apple, Oracle, and Cisco. And thanks to Cisco for being a current sponsor. And it is the sponsors who help Campus Consortium help its members. So shout out to the sponsors. Thanks for helping us be a association and community together. Before we get to our guest speaker today, Renee Patton, I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what an EdTalk is. And, you know, I think a couple weeks ago, I wasn't even thinking about this. And this just came together so quickly, and it was so relevant that I asked if, you know, we could kind of move on this, and it came together very quickly. And it came together as an Ed Talk, which allows us to bring lots of people from the community together. And Ed Talks are interactive, informational, educational talks that address strategy, issue, and needs that affect member institutions. And as a member, I suggested a topic, and you can suggest topics if you're a member that matter to your institution, and you can find others in the community that have similar interests. So obviously, we're all interested in how we're reacting to the pandemic, so we're coming together. For example, this talk resonated with me after meeting and talking with Renee. And who better to advise and provide ideas in a time of pandemic disruption than Cisco, one of the leading technology companies. And this led me to meeting Renee and talking with her, and then eventually led to the Ed Talk. So let me tell you a little bit about Renee. Renee Patton is the global leader of the education and healthcare industry at Cisco. She and her team help schools, colleges, and universities envision the future of learning and plan and execute on their vision today. With over 24 years of business management, sales, and marketing leadership experiences in both small startup and large corporations, she has managed through adversity and diversity to help organizations realize technology solutions to drive business outcomes. And affecting all of our operations, budgets, and strategic plans. Renee and I discussed how teaching and learning and the entire college experience will be significantly changed in the future, and how we all have to prepare for it. So we addressed topics about student access to technology, remote work, and multiple scenarios for when schools will reopen. All this is currently being discussed at my university, and I'm sure is yours right now. Our leadership is consumed with this. They're meeting daily about what are we going to do for the summer? What are we going to do for the fall? And everybody has different plans. So it's great when we all come together and have discussions, because we are talking to other schools in our area and across the country to decide what we're going to do. You know, there's so much detail and complexity to this current situation that sometimes we just need somebody to kind of step back, take an objective look, ourselves included, and try to take it all in and come up with some ideas. And I think I had that opportunity when I met with Renee to really say, oh my gosh, I'm meeting every day with my the folks in my own institution. It was good to kind of step out and kind of get Renee's perspective on that. And so Renee, it was really good talking with you the other day. And before I hand it over to you, again, I was remind everybody what Rosie had mentioned is that if you have any questions along the way, please enter them in the chat, and we will definitely get to them at the end and answer questions. So Renee, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Carl. And I'm hoping that all of you have good sound quality now. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I'd just like to thank Carl. I'd like to thank Campus Consortium and for really taking the time. And thanks to all of you for being here. This is truly something that hit us back in February, March, first in China, where we were working with them to help set up their temporary field hospitals. And then close on the heels of that was Italy, where they were trying to get 5,000 schools up and running and online. And so we've been learning a tremendous deal from our customers, from all of you. And I certainly got great insights from Carl when we met a week or so ago to talk about how the COVID pandemic was really impacting higher education. So taking kind of those insights from what we're seeing in the industry, from our analyst community, from all of you, We'll take a minute to talk about the impact of COVID in higher education. We'll talk about the landscape a little bit. We'd like to share some learnings that we have from this, and then sort of map out the new digital normal in terms of how we're seeing it today. So as far as the impact of COVID on higher education, you all are right at the heart of this. So you're experiencing rapid change and acceleration in a very condensed time frame. So believe it or not, over 4,000 colleges and universities have closed across the country. That impacts 25.8 million students. Many students worry about internet access for online learning. They're worried about being able to maintain attention when they're in their online courses. At the same time, 3.7 million students are expected to graduate from high school in 2020, and there were already some concerns about enrollment decreases in the 2018 and 2019 fall time periods. And there are also 2/3 of graduates who worry if they'll have to change their first choice of college. So this is the landscape. And what we're absolutely seeing is that COVID-19 is accelerating the disruption of higher education like nothing we've probably ever seen before. So many college students are thinking, do we want to go back to school in the fall? What happens if we hit a second wave in the fall and we might have to move back home again? Should we find a university that's closer to home? So they have a lot of different things that they're thinking through as this pandemic progresses. So one of the things that we immediately saw in the March timeframe was sort of emergency remote learning. And so you all did an incredible job trying to get your schools online. You've taken physical models and moved them online. And these are some of the things that we saw. So we saw a lot of emphases on short-term fixes, again, just to get the courses online, a lot of sort of, let's put a short-term Band-Aid on this and get our classes back in session. As a result of that, there were a lot of inconsistent teaching and learning experiences, and these are comments that were shared with us by our customers. A lack of resources. It really brought to the fore the importance of faculty preparedness to be able to use these new technologies. And then a lot of concerns around student privacy, scalability, and security. So again, I think in the first 30 days, it was absolutely random, to be expected given how quickly you all had to transform. One of the things that I think is the most interesting is the types of questions that we've been hearing from all of you about the situation that you're in right now. Top of mind is, how will you ensure student retention, protect your brand, and sustain your university? So this is a big one. How do you really make sure that you're creating value for your students and you're attracting them not only to go back to school, but to stay in school? Other questions around which schools and universities, which colleges and universities are students going to choose? If they do return to college, how can we effectively prepare faculty members? How can you ensure that your systems and your data are secure? And if your students don't return this fall, how can you ensure access? So access in terms of connectivity, but also devices, concerns about whether families can actually afford to send their students back to college. How do you make sure if you do open in the fall, you're going to be able to make sure that students are safe and secure and healthy? How can you streamline remote work operations? Are there certain remote functions or functions, administrative functions of the university that you want to maintain on a remote basis? And what impact will that have on your facility strategy? And what is your space utilization, sort of what are your needs from a facilities perspective? And how can you analyze that and make sure that you're right sized for whatever does happen over the summer and in the fall? So we've had a number of good learnings, again, because things are going so quickly. We're hearing back from our colleges and universities on the things that they absolutely know and have been experiencing. So from a student perspective, many students don't have adequate or any access to the internet, and many of them don't have devices. They're sharing bandwidth in their homes. So for example, both of their parents might be home working remotely. They might have a younger sibling who's attending classes in K-12 online every hour of the day. They might be in remote or rural locations. So not only might you be having challenges with bandwidth in the institution, but they're having challenges with bandwidth at home. And again, they may not even have devices. So many universities are going out and repurposing laptops and computers to make sure that you can get devices into the hands of students. So that's definitely one of the learnings that we have. From a faculty perspective, we know faculty development has to be prioritized. So it's one thing to get these courses online and to digitize them. It's another to make sure the faculty members not only know how to use the technology, but how to make sure that they're breaking down the lessons and identifying the pedagogical aspects and understanding how technology can support the pedagogy, not just what button do I push to get a class to go online. From an administrative perspective, we're really seeing, as you all know, and many of you are obviously working from home right now, but many of those campus operational functions have to be virtualized. And there's a bright spot here in terms of, as you rethink space, you're going to be constantly looking for areas where you can increase revenue and decrease cost. So you might find some cost savings in terms of virtualizing some of those administrative functions. Finally, I think one of the most important learnings is security. So security and privacy absolutely matter, and security impacts brand. So I think that's a critical component of your planning as you think about how you plan for the future. I think we can also take learnings from different states, counties, cities, organizations from across the country and across the globe, as I know all of you are. We're watching the news and reading all different kinds of things to figure out some of the considerations that we might have for when you do open campuses. So this is just an example of how one governor is thinking about opening California, but certainly in coordination with other states along the West Coast. We're considering widespread testing. What do we do for the medically vulnerable amongst our population? And certainly that's a concern in higher education as well. How about added capacity in hospitals? So what will you do with your student health centers and with the different health services that you provide to students, and how are you looking at your research facilities and your functions and your research grants to find promising treatments? Certainly physical distancing guidelines, this is going to be absolutely critical for all of you. And then many universities are looking into statewide data tracking systems to be able to identify challenges and issues on the campus. There are a few different models out there that are kind of interesting in terms of what the future might hold. It's a very uncertain future. This happens to be from Morgan Stanley. And so they have kind of a projected timeline of what might happen. And they look at schools reopening potentially in September, but then another possible second wave of infections. So what happens in that second wave, if there is indeed one? The other thing that we're seeing, and you're going to see a little poll pop up here hopefully for you, is a model from McKinsey. And so McKinsey basically thinks there are three major scenarios. One is that schools could absolutely open in the fall. You will go back to normal with some social distancing and other procedures. The second scenario is that you'll open in the fall, but we'll have a second wave of COVID that ends up closing the schools. And the third is that schools are closed for the entire school year. So you'll see this poll sort of pop up, and I thought this was interesting because as Carl and I were chatting before, and we'll just ask you to select either scenario 1, 2, or 3 in terms of what you believe is the most likely. So I know Anjali has the poll up there for us. And Carl, when you and I were talking, you had kind of a very interesting perspective on this.
Well, I think, Renee, that there's, we have 3 scenarios that you're talking about here, but I know we've had discussions, and other schools I've talked to have had 8, 10, 12 different scenarios about how they might open in the fall. And they include, kind of hybrid situations where they may teach online for an extended period in the beginning of the fall, certain classes, and then move to on-ground classes for the latter half of the fall. Some might take the entire fall. And there's different iterations and different ways that they would kind of combine on-ground and online classes. So all that, of course, has impact with the registrar's office and scheduling and student affairs. And so it's quite a complex solution, whichever scenario you choose. And of course, each scenario, it changes every day. The news that you get about your particular state and what the rules are around being able to return to campus.
It's an interesting question, and there are so many different comments coming in through chat about there are very many more than than just the 3. So it looks like we do have a winner, and it's scenario number 2. And so 50% of you believe that it could be scenario number 2, where you open but you have a second wave. Now, a close second is scenario number 1. So 37% of you believe that we'll have scenario number 1, where we open in the fall, but we might go back to normal with some social distancing or other procedures in place. So we'll go ahead and close the poll, but I think it's really an important question, because scenario planning is absolutely something that we're all doing, not only in higher education, but also at Cisco, when we look at different scenarios. And then we're certainly doing that within our education and healthcare teams for our customers. We're being asked to do that as well. All right, so there's a lot of uncertainty, and so we wanted to take a look at all of this information and then come up with some ideas and thoughts for you on the way forward. So I love this quote from the Silver Linings Playbook, that if clouds are blocking the sun, there will always be a silver lining that reminds me to keep on trying. And I think the silver lining here is that our universities, our colleges and universities, have done an absolutely incredible job of getting your courses online and serving your students. And so you are absolutely demonstrating that you can deliver learning and you can deliver student services remotely. The other thing that's really exciting is that faculty members are rapidly adopting virtual learning technologies, and they are learning it very quickly. And I think the other thing that for many of you who've been talking about virtual and online learning for years, you and your professors are quickly developing proof points and use cases. And so you're proving out the ability to deliver things remotely and to reach these students and to keep them engaged. So at Cisco, what we're looking at, and I thought this was, when I saw this, I thought, well, this is actually really good for higher education too, because what we're doing is we're thinking about how do we respond. So in the last month and a half, we have been in absolute respond mode, as many of you have. And that's why things end up being a little bit random. And that's just a result of how quickly you have to respond. So this is your emergency response, immediately thinking about social distancing, closing schools for more than spring break, and then making decisions not to go back for the rest of the school year, figuring out how to engage electronically or online. We're kind of in the reflect stage now. This doesn't mean you're not continuing to respond, but now people are taking a step back to say, how do I reflect on what's happening? And thinking about things like hybrid learning modes. And so that is something that's coming up in chat as well, as how do you create these flexible learning environments, number 1. Number 2, how do you retain your institutional knowledge? So really maintaining your brand and stabilize operations. The third component is reimagining. So how do you plan for the new normal by embracing horizons 1 and 2 and taking risks and failing fast on your new models? And then finally, we rebound into a new sort of future that we've envisioned. So you're putting your models to work, and you're building on this newfound agility that maybe you didn't feel as though you had in the past. So one of the things that we think is really important is that you create the right foundation. So again, you take those learnings from sort of 1 and 2, and you create a simple, secure, reliable platform for distance learning and for administrative collaboration that's easy to deploy and easy to use. And we think this is so important because you don't know what the future will hold. And so you really need that sort of elastic network that can scale up or down regardless of what you decide to do. And the network needs to be simple, seamless, secure, supported, and smart. So you have to be able to design your network so that it can help you to be prepared for any eventuality. The other things that we're learning are some do's and don'ts around virtual learning courses. So the first is make it easy for your faculty members by doing simple things like integrating your collaboration tools with your learning management systems to make it easier for faculty members to schedule their online courses directly from the learning management system. The second, and this is something that as teachers and we've all done, is you think about what are the goals of the course and then break each lesson down. And this is from the technology director at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. and she's the EdTech director, and she's really kind of helping their faculty through how to structure these online courses so that you break it down into pieces. Her recommendation is that you pre-record short videos for students to watch and then discuss them in a shorter class meeting. So what you'll see on the don't column is if you have an online course, or if you have a regular course on Mondays and Wednesdays from 1 to 2:30, you don't necessarily want to have an online course over a collaboration tool from 1 to 2:30 on the same days. Instead, what you might do is record a video and then have a shorter course for students to join. Because, as you know, many of them are in remote locations, so they may not have the bandwidth to stay in an online course for an hour and a half. And I think that really plays into the combination of synchronous versus asynchronous classes. So how can you combine the two? Using the collaboration tools to break students into virtual groups and teams, and then creating persistent learning environments where faculty members and students can engage before, during, and after class. This is one of my favorites. This will tell you how long ago I was a teacher, but you don't want to replace overhead transparencies with PowerPoint. So again, really try to think of new and different ways to engage learners. They have a hard time with their attention span, so lecturing the whole time isn't very effective for them necessarily. Many of you I know have been doing online courses for years, so you know that. I think the other thing is not to underestimate the importance of security or video quality. They both are critically important, and anything that you can do to get students active and engaged, projects, activities, and take the best of what you've been doing for years in some of your traditional methods and bring them into this new reality. You do not have to compromise on the quality that you've always delivered, because that is the heart of your institution. And as we talk about competitive differentiators and how you really define value, you are at the heart of that. You, your faculty members, the services that you provide to your students. So just because we're moving virtual, it doesn't mean that you have to give up on that. Some of the things that we're seeing emerge, and it's really things that sort of will probably need, and things that can help you to differentiate and maybe justify students coming back to school. So the first is the work that we're seeing around contact tracing and being able to use your wireless network to get insights about where students are, who's been infected. So I think there's some promising developments in this area. In the second area around health and well-being, again, parents are concerned about sending students back. Students are concerned about going. There are so many different health and well-being applications out there today that will help students to feel secure and will help you to provide a better opportunity for them to take care of themselves and to create a safe learning environment. The third is new learning spaces. So how can you really envision what your campus and what your facility should look like? One university mentioned that they may not be able to put 2 students in a dorm room, and so they might have to do one-to-one, and they're looking at hotels in the local area close to the university to house students. And they're also looking at repurposing buildings. Maybe they have students go into a building that is more with, maybe it's in the English building where they could do more online learning. So they turn the English building into dorm rooms, and then they keep the science labs and just have fewer students go into the science labs. So those are the facilities planning considerations that we have. Student retention, we are doing a lot of work with different vendors who engage students with online apps for on campus, and now they're virtualizing those to engage students better in a virtual environment. Esports, so again, as we're looking at increasing revenue and decreasing costs, one of the concerns many universities have, of course, is their sports programs. And so how can you do something virtually that will help to offset the revenues that you had from your athletics programs? And then finally, career pathways. I think this is such a critical component in terms of the value that you provide and what you're delivering to students, to be able to look to the vendor community even for these different certifications and programs that are already out there, where you can offer those up and make them relevant for students, and then they can go out and get a job in whatever this new economy ends up being. So with that, I just wanted to leave you with a framework that we created before the pandemic hit. And many of our universities came and said, well, how do you recommend that we do strategic planning? What are some of the best practices? And it really was all about vision and leadership. Culture was number 2, but culture was by far the most important. methodology. So what are the teaching methodologies, and how can technology support that, as opposed to let's just insert technology into the equation or the problem, because technology is actually the easiest part once you get 1, 2, and 3 done. So we do have a white paper on this. Happy to share that with the Campus Consortium for distribution to the membership if you're interested in seeing that, with a lot of different use cases. And so one of my favorite quotes is from Zeno of Citrium, and it's about stoicism. And I think as we manage through this and we take these learnings and design our universities of the future, a stoic is someone who transforms fear into prudence, pain into transformation, mistakes into initiation, and desire into undertaking. So with that, thank you so much for the time and the opportunity. And Carl, back to you in case we have any questions that came through.
Great session, Renee. Great information, and it really resonated with a lot of the issues and discussions that I know my institution is having. You know, one comment I wanted to make was about you had a slide up about esports, and I know that esports was something that is kind of a new thing that a lot of schools are definitely interested in. I know we were pursuing esports for a while, and we were thinking, oh, this is really good. It will help. And we were thinking about designing a program. We connected with some consultants to, get an idea what it would take. But now that COVID has hit, and it's really changed us really in a way forever. I mean, we always have to think from now on that we may need to go online at any time. Even if we do come back, how esports kind of takes and programs like that seem to take on a new importance now. Like I'm thinking that they'll be elevated in importance. And what are your thoughts on esports programs?
It's a great question. It's not a one-to-one replacement. I mean, an esports program isn't necessarily going to replace your football program. However, it is something that, I mean, students are very, I mean, especially this generation, this is a big thing for them. And so I think you're kind of looking for anything out there that makes sense for you as an institution and that would better attract students and help to really associate them with your brand. And so I think, Carl, esports could be one of those things. Again, I don't think it's a direct replacement, but I think they're absolutely looking at those kinds of programs to help differentiate the experience they'd like to have.
Yeah, and the other thing is not just to have programs, that are, attractive to our students, but it's attracting students too. Yes. So when I'm just thinking about, we don't really know what enrollment's going to look like in the fall. We have all worked within the world that we knew before this, but now it's changed. And what are your thoughts on not just enrollment, but retaining students?
Yeah, I heard an interesting talk last night, and it was General Stan McChrystal, and he said, now is the time to lead. And so as all of you are leaders within your institutions, and I think you're being able to provide that beacon of the future in terms of what your institution is going to do and what differentiates you will not only help you to attract students, but to retain them. So I think thinking through the key things that where you're really going to be able to provide value to students, those are the things that will help. And anything that you can do to assure students and faculty and their families so that they know if they come to your institution, you have a plan for social distancing. You have a way to take care of students in case they do fall ill. You have an academic program that's going to be virtual, and it's going to be, potentially they'll take some courses from the library or in their dorm room. So you have kind of this flexible learning environment, and that you're thinking about the future for these students, that you understand that the world is changing and that you're providing career options that will help them to be employable once they get out. So that's just my thinking on it, Carl. Oops, I think we have Carl on mute.
We talked about attracting students. We talked about, some programs to keep current students engaged. What about revenue? So revenue, that's tied to revenue, with enrollment. But are there any ideas around how we can increase revenue and decrease costs with what we have? Because we may not get what we think in the fall. So we really have to kind of pull back and be very conservative, I think, in this coming year.
So kind of coming from a business environment, and we are in education, higher education, we are in a business. And I think one of the things is making sure that you right size the tuition and the fees for what you're offering. So I think that's really an important consideration, because a student, you may think that, online is the same as in person, but your students may not. And so they may be thinking, well, if I'm taking it online, I might want to have to pay less money than if I'm in person. So I think really thinking through the different components that you're currently offering, to say, how do I right size the tuition? So I think it's looking at the current programs, and then how do I differentiate? So why might I be able to charge more for an online course? Do I have some sort of a project or an exploration or something that students can do in their community to make that more relevant? So I think that's number one. I think another revenue opportunity is, because all of these schools are online, you'll be able to attract a much broader student audience in a lot of ways. When you think about it, you have your brands. More and more students are going to be willing to go to your university from places that they may not have considered before, because they felt like they had to travel and they couldn't afford to travel and be there. So I think your online enrollment could go up. And then from a cost savings perspective, I really do think it's this concept of, how do you repurpose your facilities, and which buildings do you need, and what's the current utilization, what's the utilization in light of COVID, and then how do you potentially turn some of those buildings into revenue generators for the campus? So I think it's kind of looking through all the different line items to say, what are some potential revenue sources, and then how do we decrease costs?
Yeah, that's that. All those are big issues. And another big issue, and maybe this could be a whole nother discussion for another Ed Talk, but I'm just thinking, when you were talking about contact tracing earlier, your emphasis on IT security. We have the whole security and privacy issue, and now we're monitoring, and we're really being aware of who's on campus, and even our student population. And sometimes, the security and privacy is important, but in higher education, we're not like corporations. We're not like for-profit America. It's a very different environment, and information wants to be free in higher education. But how do you balance the security and the privacy against the necessity of keeping people safe?
Yeah, and it's it's such a great question. I have to jump in on that. So this is a perfect example of a challenge that you're struggling with, and where you all can absolutely help prepare students in this area, because those are exactly the kinds of jobs that they're going to be able to explore after college. So they're exploring them through college, after college. Many of you already have cybersecurity training programs, but that's a great competitive differentiator, because basically all of these businesses are going online. There is a huge population of remote workers. There are many, many more devices and endpoints out there today that have to be secured. So you need web security, network security, endpoint security. And with this huge influx, there are that many more points of incursion into the network. And so I think, Carl, your example of what do we do about security, not only does it become a problem that you're trying to solve, but it's a problem that you can help your students to learn how to solve, and really connect that to a career that they can have when they get out of college.
Great. I could talk to you all day, but I definitely want to make sure we get to some of the questions in our chat, and we've got a few of them here. Well, one of the last questions was, does anybody have a good way that they are, providing access to computer labs? I think that's what labs means. That's from Kimberly King at Ave Maria University. And if it's computer labs, we have, labs had a double meaning in our school, because, the science programs, they meant beakers and doing experiments. And so, and then other folks, other faculty were talking about computer labs. So I know that in our environment for the science labs, that there's the virtual labs that faculty have reached out and found a few of those to basically take the place of in-class experiments. And then in terms of computer labs, we're looking at VMware Horizon and, other ways that students can remotely connect to the software. I don't know if you have anything about labs.
Absolutely that. So definitely VDI, so virtualizing those labs is a great approach. I think, Carl, you were saying that you're repurposing laptops and PCs from the labs to students who don't have them. So I think that's the other opportunity. So I think there's going to be this real concept of distancing, because there is the augmented reality and virtual reality, of course, just the whole idea of mixed reality. You think of how we used to do, anatomy classes. So now there are virtual anatomy tables. So there are a lot of different virtualized technologies, but many schools, as you all know, you still have science labs. You still have all these physical labs. So it could be that you end up going to like an A-B grouping. So that's actually what we're going to be doing at Cisco, where you're split into a couple of groups. So if you have to go into the office, then you go in alternating days. So if you're A, you might go on Monday and Wednesday. If you're in B, you go Tuesday and Thursday, just to make sure that we can maintain social distancing. So I think those kinds of creative ideas around, maybe your lab is your lab, but instead of having 20 students in there, you have 10, and you're really kind of looking at the dimension of the lab, and you're figuring out how many can it hold based on the distancing requirements.
Sean Denny writes, do you think there will be any innovations in the technology for virtual learning that will better empower professors and students that come from this? I would like to see some better video-based classroom solutions that are affordable for more than R1 schools. And that's a great point, because there's so many small to medium-sized colleges and universities that don't have the budgets of the bigger schools, but still need similar technologies. Anything on that, Renee?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say look at technology providers who are looking at this holistically, because you'll end up at some point going into the physical campus. So even things like finding a collaboration solution that's secure, finding the collaboration solution that's integrated with the learning management system. So you have that integration to make ease of scheduling. You just make scheduling easier. Finding a collaboration solution that has integrated chat communication, so you can have these students and classes in persistent collaboration spaces and chat rooms. And looking at ways to turn all of your existing endpoints into video endpoints within the classroom environments, because you'll end up having to have more of those. It's likely that you'll have to have more. So you have your existing lecture halls and classrooms, but you might also want to repurpose different areas for learning spaces where you have smaller video endpoints. So I would be thinking about the endpoints within those spaces, and then how everything fits together, from the collaboration software to the collaboration spaces to the physical learning spaces on campus, and all of that should come together. So I think we're going to see that becoming more and more seamless and more secure.
Great. Question from Vic Chadawada. Any thoughts on what future innovations will be necessary on the technology and associated resourcing capacity side to dealing with the new paradigm, especially if this continues into option 2 or 3 from that poll that we had earlier? How do you see IT and enterprise applications responding to these emerging needs in a timely manner?
Yep, great question. And so as we're looking at our solution portfolio for education, we have all these, and all of you have your strategic plans, you're thinking about all these different technologies. So we've really kind of prioritized it in 3 main areas. Number 1, secure virtual learning. So we have to look for innovation in that area, kind of what I just described. So secure virtual learning would be number 1. The second is secure administrative collaboration. So how can you make sure that your administrators are just as effective and efficient, whether they're working from a campus location or from home? And then the third area is really web networking and security. And then I would say, from an innovation perspective, I just think envisioning this whole idea of what does smart learning look like. So in the past, we would have said smart campus. Now you're kind of not sure what your campus will look like, but how do you make sure that you have smart learning across and throughout whatever experience it is that you provide to students?
Great feedback. Here's another question from Rob Johnson, which I think is also has been an issue and is even more importantly an issue now. Has anyone started any conversations regarding meeting the needs of folks who live in remote areas, adding fiber and perhaps wireless at other congregation points that are not so close to a campus and hotspots that do not work great? So I think it's the remote schools. These are the schools, like I know here in Pennsylvania, I'm in Philadelphia, there's plenty of internet service providers. There's competition in this market here. So it's accessible. But as you go west in Pennsylvania toward Ohio, now the resources are much more scarce. The businesses are not there. And more importantly, there's really no fiber, in some of these areas. So people cannot get the technology, yet they're being asked to do the same things that we are in the city out west. Any ideas in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the service providers are trying to come to the fore to say, here's some affordable internet bandwidth and access. But as you said, Carl, they don't always have that even available. So University of Wisconsin-Whitewater is one of the universities that said, we're remote. We should not be doing online courses for 3 hours a week for these students because they may not be able to get access. So I think number one, shortening the online courses would be one thing to consider. Another thing that we are seeing in K-12 that's an interesting learning for higher ed is that they're equipping their buses with Wi-Fi. So they have Wi-Fi hotspots. They're parking them outside of the schools so that students can literally drive up and get access to the internet within the parking lot from the school bus. The other thing to consider is agreements with K-12 schools in areas where you have student populations, and potentially do a sharing agreement with those K-12 schools where you could get access to their wireless networks. So I think that's another one. And at the same time, being able to build your concurrent enrollment program. So I think those alliances with K-12 are a consideration. And then other universities have remote locations for students in those areas where they have one building equipped with, or a small building equipped with telepresence, and students can go there with appropriate social distancing guidelines in place to join that class in Philadelphia. And they do it remotely. So they're in their town.
Yeah, I think that, here in Philadelphia, we're trying to work with the Philadelphia School District, and they had reached out to a lot of the higher eds for assistance with bleed over from their Wi-Fi networks to work with their students in the school district. I'm not sure that's the best way to provide internet service access to Philadelphia school students. But, I think we really need to be studying on making sure that we provide internet access to everybody. Internet should be like being able to get a TV and tune into a channel or a radio. You should be able to get that service instead of them having to kind of get in the car and try to find somebody to bleed over Wi-Fi that has it. But yeah, that was good feedback. Renee, got another comment in the chat that says that this person met you many years ago and remember you or your colleagues talking about how Cisco was working on how they might incorporate holograms into higher education. With the transition to online learning, this seems like an excellent time to incorporate this technology if there is sufficient bandwidth to support it. Can you update us on this? Oh, Gregory Shuckman, University of Central Florida.
Hi, Gregory. Nice to see your name in the chat. I saw your question, and I think we showed a hologram of John Chambers from Cisco on stage at one point for CES or something many years ago, and that was kind of the vision. This was during, you all remember Second Life, right? When we were trying to create these virtual environments. So I don't know that I necessarily see the collaboration technologies coming together with things like holograms anymore, but I certainly see some sort of a mix between virtual and augmented reality where it plays within these virtual learning environments. They may just not be within the collaboration applications, which is what I think, Gregory, we may have mentioned back when we were talking about holograms. So I don't know if it's going to be a hologram, but I think definitely mixed reality. We'll see more and more of that.
Also just to follow up on our privacy discussion, we also had a comment that transparency and constant communication is a start in regards to the privacy and security conversations. Yeah, that's a discussion that we all need to have, as well as the access to internet. I think these initiatives are taking on much more urgency. I mean, they've always been something that we've been working in the IT community anyway. But definitely these conversations are more upfront, and we need to be having them between ourselves, because I think together we can solve a lot of these problems.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we did talk about the science labs a little bit, and there was a lot of activity in the chat about the hands-on labs, working in science labs, or we have sim labs here at our school for simulation labs for nursing. So there are these devices that are used to simulate patient care experiences for our student, and now they cannot access them. So what can be done about trying to access that? And so I guess this gets into more exploration of virtual reality and these other technologies. Is there anything you can talk about, any kind of cutting edge or bleeding edge things that Cisco might be involved with?
Really just kind of, as all of you are looking at the ecosystem, we don't specifically develop VR, AR technologies, but we're always looking for ecosystem partners who can do that. So there are a couple of them out there. I think as we look at the EDUCAUSE top 10 IT trends year after year, there's kind of this promise of virtual reality. I'm not sure there's any company out there who's actually doing it exceptionally well, but given the pandemic, that we could see the same acceleration there. Potentially in terms of venture funding, where more and more exploration is being done around those technologies to create more immersive learning experiences. So, there are a couple of companies out there doing some really interesting things, but I'm not sure any of them have the capability to take it to scale. If anybody knows of anyone, let us know. We're happy to take a look at them.
Right. Yep. Real good insight, Renee, and great conversations. But I think we're reaching the end of our time. And I just want to thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for attending. Great feedback. And this conversation can continue if, if you're part of the Campus Consortium membership, that's great. Just let's keep talking about that. Or if you want to join, it's no charge. We just need to get you in here, and we can keep these discussions going. As everybody's working on how to deal with the unique situation, remember that Campus Consortium supports the member community through grants and underwriting. And through my experience, this assistance has helped accomplish my objectives and the institution objectives. And if you have any ideas that can benefit students about what we talked about today, that they can help our educational institutions, feel free to reach out to me or the consortium, and perhaps we can develop an idea and take it from there. I know 2 or 3 things that I immediately want to work on now coming from this. I'm very passionate about some of them, so I would love to work with some of you out there. And I'd like to thank Renee from Cisco. Renee did a great job, great insight, and the Campus Consortium team for supporting this talk, and everybody for attending today. And if you want to host or present an Ed Talk like this, or you have an idea that would benefit the community, feel free to reach out to me or the consortium. And this recording of this Ed Talk will be available at campusconsortium.org. And thanks for attending, and have a great day, everybody. Take care.